Jesus is Lord. Welcome to Victory News, Friday, October the 4th, 2024. I'm Greg Stevens, along with Mike Garofalo, Fiora Hernandez, and Tim Fox. These are the stories that we're watching for you right now. Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, well, he wants to cut off federal funding to non-government organizations assisting illegal immigrants. We'll ask retired acting ICE Director Ron Vitiello if he thinks this will help remedy the border crisis. And Kamala's relationship woes are plaguing her again, now with an ex-girlfriend of her husband's claiming that he slapped her across the face in public. Well, we're going to talk about that with the No Doubt About It podcast host, Victory News contributor Mark Ronchetti, about these strange entanglements and a whole lot more. But first, let's go to Fiora Hernandez with our headlines. Fiora.
Thank you, Greg. The three-day longshoremen strike that affected ports on the East Coast and in the Gulf of Mexico is now over after 45,000 dock workers came to a tentative agreement.
Number one, we have the language that we need for to fight against automation. There'll be no fully automated terminals or semi-automated terminals on the East and the Gulf Coast of the United States over the next 6 years, so the life of this new contract. The other thing that we were very proud of achieving in this 3 days of tough bargaining was the fact that we agreed on a wage package that was robust enough that would allow us to go back to work, and we will continue to negotiate on the rest of the items over the next 90 days.
Workers liked what they heard on Thursday evening and agreed to get back on the job this morning. The two sides will spend the next 3 months negotiating details, with the previously in place master agreement extended until January 15th. As part of the deal, the dock workers reached a conditional agreement to get a 62% pay raise over the next 6 years, with the offer being on the table for the next 90 days. If no deal is reached regarding other union demands, the deal will be pulled. The impact of the striking dock workers spurred panic, with consumers clearing shelves of paper goods at a Staten Island Costco despite official warnings against hoarding. If it had continued, the strike would have disrupted supply chains, potentially causing shortages and price increases for U.S. consumers. House Republicans have warned that the United States homeland is at a serious risk of a terror attack. In a new report called the Terror Threat Snapshot, the House Homeland Security Committee blames the Biden-Harris administration for a, quote, weak and inadequate response to the danger in recent years. In the report, the committee lays out that foreign terrorist groups such as the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Hamas pose an immediate threat to the American homeland and warrant a serious response by the Biden administration. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Mark Green and Tennessee Republicans said in a statement, the system is blinking red yet again, as even the head of the FBI has noted. Despite heightened threats from terrorists, the Biden-Harris administration continues to demonstrate weak leadership on the world stage and fails to admit its policy failures that brought us here. We must change course and take the necessary actions to protect the homeland. In all, the report lists more than 50 jihadi cases across 29 states since April of 2021. Amid Joe Biden pledging, we have your back, he said, Hurricane Helene survivors in North Carolina are still waiting for aid from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, more than a week after the deadly storm devastated the southeast. North Carolina State Representative Donnie Loftus spoke with the Washington Times Thursday and indicated the bottled water and other supplies, as well as pet food he was delivering, were provided by nearby churches, not the federal government, adding, quote, I haven't seen any federal folks. I haven't seen FEMA or local emergency crews. It's just neighbor helping neighbor. The death toll from the storm continues to rise, now topping 200. Meanwhile, President Biden defended their federal response.
Days before the storm hit, I pre-positioned extensive resources on the ground throughout the southeast, extensively. First responders, search and rescue teams, food, water, ambulances.
Earlier in the week, former President Trump toured part of the impacted area and accused the administration of not helping Republican areas of the country. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is reportedly set to appear with Donald Trump when he visits the Peach State later today, as the number of fatalities from Hurricane Helene continues to rise. The two popular leaders among Republicans had been at odds since the 2020 election, but in August, that changed.
We got to win. You know, we got to win from the top of the ticket on down. I've been saying consistently for a long time, we cannot afford another 4 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I think, you know, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz would be even worse. So we need to send Donald Trump back to the White House.
According to a post on X by an ABC News reporter, Trump and Kemp will reportedly meet in Evans, Georgia at 3:45 p.m. East Coast time for a briefing on the devastation caused by Hurricane Helene. Mike?
If you were a former Republican representative from Wyoming, Liz Cheney appeared at a campaign event on Thursday in Wisconsin with Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee. Cheney shared a bit of a history lesson while taking a shot at Donald Trump.
You all know, of course, that here in Ripon, the Republican Party was founded. It was founded in a meeting in 1854 in the Little White Schoolhouse, and it was founded by people who were opposed to slavery. It was that Republican Party, the party of Lincoln and Eisenhower, the party of Reagan and Bush. It's that party that I belonged to my entire life.
Of course, the political attacks kept coming, with this one from the vice president, perhaps making some wonder if she was talking about the Biden-Harris administration and their failure to secure the southern border of the United States.
The tragic truth that we are facing in this election for President of the United States is that there is actually an honest question about whether one of the candidates will uphold the oath to the Constitution of the United States.
Kamala Harris went on to praise Cheney for her leadership and courage. Now, during the 2020 election, however, Cheney had called Harris a, quote, radical liberal. Republican Donald Trump received the endorsement of hundreds of national security and foreign policy leaders this week. The Daily Caller reports national security officials, retired members of the military, former ambassadors, and families of service members killed during Joe Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal are supporting the former president. According to the letter of endorsement obtained by Capitol Notes, the Biden-Harris administration's foreign policy was marked by repeated failures. It also stated, "We are closer to a third world war than ever before." By contrast, the presidency of Donald Trump focused on restoring peace throughout the world. This was supported by a strong American military and resolute international diplomacy. 25 cabinet and equivalent officials signed the letter, including former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and former Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf. 11 Gold Star family members of the troops killed in Abbey Gate in Afghanistan also signed that letter. Greg.
Republican Congressman from Florida Matt Gaetz introduced a bill on Thursday to cut federal funding from non-governmental organizations assisting illegal immigrants. The Blocking Assistance and Resources to Restrict the Illegal Entry and Residency Act, or Barrier Act, would cut off federal funding from entities that aid or facilitate illegal immigration. The law would ban providing, promoting, or advertising transportation, shelter, financial support, or legal assistance to illegal immigrants. In a statement to Fox News Digital, Gaetz wrote this, quote, "NGOs and nonprofits serve as the foot soldiers for the Biden-Harris administration's mass migration policies by helping illegal aliens cross the border and stay here for years after entering illegally." Heritage Foundation has conducted investigations into several groups and found NGOs assisting migrants throughout Central America. Washington Examiner reported some of the biggest organizations in the network are Catholic Charities USA, Jewish Family Services, Global Refuge, and United Way Worldwide. Joining us now is a former chief of the United States Border Patrol who served as director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the Trump administration, Ron Vitiello. Ron, welcome back to Victory News.
Thanks for inviting me. Good to be with you.
It sounds like Congressman Gaetz has exposed a quite large enabler of our illegal immigrant crisis in the NGOs and nonprofits. Ron, did you see these groups in action getting illegal aliens across the border?
Maybe not across the border, right? The cartels and the smugglers are sort of in charge of that at our southwest border, but certainly facilitating people in the pipeline, helping people, settle in Mexico during the former migrant protection protocols. The churches and these NGOs helped people on that side of the border when the Trump administration was trying to implement that plan at scale. But they're also involved worldwide, right? Through the UN, through our own tax dollars of funding NGOs that are essentially facilitating people leaving home, putting themselves into the hands of smuggler and in that danger and coming into the United States. So, yeah, we saw it. There are businesses, there are nonprofits that are doing very well this time, or in this season, if you will, because the border is so busy. There are so many people coming under the pendency of the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration. And so, yeah, it's a big problem because we're sort of helping them help destroy our sovereignty at the border and selling people false hope, frankly, coming into the United States.
That's shocking that you and I are paying for that to actually happen. So former Trump senior advisor Stephen Miller believes the Biden-Harris administration have taken the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program. They've siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for hotels, food, and other costs to care for illegal immigrants. Listen to this.
The reason why those Americans in North Carolina, those mothers, those fathers, those precious little children, were left to die, were left on rooftops begging their government for help that never came, is because Kamala Harris turned FEMA into an illegal alien resettlement agency.
Now, we've seen this before in Maui and in other places. If FEMA resources were diverted to illegal aliens, is it any wonder so many families fell in North Carolina? They feel abandoned, Ron. Is it any wonder?
No, it's absolutely true. When you send hundreds of millions of dollars in tax money to FEMA to prepare and respond for hurricanes, natural disasters, and man-made disasters, frankly, and that money gets diverted to help settle or to help transport or to help feed and care for individuals who have come into the country illegally, that's a big problem. And if you would divert those funds, and the people in North Carolina and Georgia and Eastern Kentucky are suffering because our own government is ill-equipped or underfunded because of the diversion of that money.
That's incredible. Kamala Harris visited the border recently, making sure she did a photo up along the border wall that was built by Barack Obama, not Donald Trump. Now she's running a campaign ad saying she will secure the border. Are you buying it?
No. She has a record on this issue. She wanted to decriminalize illegal entry. She was funding ICE before she was for defunding the police. And she's talked about decriminalizing being in the country illegally, ending detention for people who are in the country illegally. So her record is very clear. It's not a good record as it relates to securing the border or having an immigration system that has integrity. So, yeah, her going to the border was a photo op. Unfortunately, the theme here is she did it on our tax money as the vice president, and so it's a big problem.
Okay, a recent footage here I want to show you from the Darien Gap in Panama. You can see that the flood of people making their way toward the United States border right now. Many want to reach it before the election in case Trump is reelected. Does this mean that those trying to enter the United States know that Biden and Harris have no border security problem, or policy, rather?
Yes, they always have. After Joe Biden got elected, when he was president-elect, the traffic started coming back, and now it's back in record numbers, and this is the same thing.
It's still happening. Be sure to learn more about Ron and his work to strengthen our borders and call government to account for our security. Visit ronvitello.com. Thank you, sir, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Mike?
Greg, Joe Biden's sweeping student loan forgiveness plan had been set to go back into effect after a federal judge allowed the restraining order halting it to expire. But on Thursday, St. Louis-based U.S. District Judge Matthew Schelp issued a preliminary injunction against that relief plan. On Wednesday, U.S. District Judge Randall Hall ruled the 7 states that brought that case lacked standing and his court couldn't be a venue. He directed the case to be transferred to Missouri because the states claimed the plan would most harm Missouri's higher education loan authority. However, on Thursday, Judge Schelp brought the relief plan to a screeching halt again until he reviews the case. States bringing the lawsuit: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Missouri, North Dakota, as well as Ohio. Allege the U.S. Department of Education's debt cancellation plan is illegal. The British government's left-leaning Labour Party announced Thursday it will surrender sovereignty of a British overseas territory in the Indian Ocean that has hosted a joint U.S.-UK military base and enlisting post for half a century. Breitbart News reports the United Kingdom is giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, which has been moving into China's sphere of influence as they seek sovereignty. President of the archipelago urged the UK to release them at the United Nations last week. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, declared this: giving up the Chagos Islands is a strategic disaster. Our American allies will be furious and Beijing delighted. Labour are making the world a more dangerous place. Tom Tugendhat, a leadership contender for the opposition Tories, added this: this is a shameful retreat, undermining our security and leaving our allies exposed. Fior.
Like a number of the members of a girls' high school soccer team in New Hampshire on Tuesday refused to play against a team with a male player. Several players from the Hillsborough Deering High School girls' soccer team boycotted a game against Kearsarge Regional High School due to the inclusion of a gender-confused player on the opposing team. The players cited concerns over biology and physical safety, stating it was about the risks of playing a full-contact sport against someone of the opposite sex. Parents supported the boycott, with some expressing concerns that the boys' speed and strength gave Kearsarge an advantage. The girls were not disciplined for their decision, though New Hampshire law allows so-called trans students to play on teams matching the gender they identify with. A judge sentenced a former Mesa County, Colorado County Clerk Tina Peters to 9 years in prison Thursday in connection with a 2020 election security breach. Peters was found guilty of 7 out of 10 felony and misdemeanor charges after she allegedly gave unauthorized access to county voting equipment. The prosecution successfully argued that Peters had used a security badge without the owner's permission to give Conan Hayes admission to the Mesa County election system. Peters' attorneys argued she was attempting to preserve voting records.
Had she not preserved her access logs, she wouldn't be charged. But by fulfilling her duty, she was charged.
The judge at 21st Judicial District, Matthew Barrett, gave Peters a scathing rebuke before issuing the sentence, then added it wasn't simply about punishment and acceptance of responsibility, but the stiff sentence was a deterrent for other elected officials. Peters maintains her innocence, and her attorneys indicated they would appeal. Tim?
New York City police have released disturbing video of a rifle-wielding would-be robber terrorizing a New York City bakery last month. If you have children watching, you may want them to look away for the next minute. The footage from September 23rd shows the suspect lumbering through the Panorama Italian Bakery in Queens carrying a rifle, his face covered with a bandana and sunglasses. According to police, the would-be thief demanded money. The worker escaped the intruder by fleeing through the back door after telling him she had no money. The gunman then ran out the front door empty-handed and, according to the New York Post, was still at large. Fox News reported the bakery employees said more NYPD patrols, especially at night, would make that area safer. Mike?
Tim, more dirty laundry when it comes to Vice President Kamala Harris' husband, Doug Emhoff. The Daily Mail is reporting the nation's current second gentleman is accused of slapping his then-girlfriend in 2012 while they were at the Cannes Film Festival in France. 3 of the girlfriend's friends talked to the Daily Mail about the encounter, accusing Emhoff of hitting his girlfriend at the time so hard she reportedly spun around. The Mail report identifies the ex-girlfriend as a New York attorney who showed the reporter travel documents and a picture proving she and Emhoff were in France together at the time of the incident. The claims about Emhoff were made public about a month after another story broke about Kamala Harris's husband. In that instance, Doug Emhoff was accused of and later admitted to cheating on his first wife with his children's nanny, who he impregnated. According to Fox News, a representative of Emhoff says the story about the incident in France is not true, telling the news outlet Semaphore, quote, any suggestion that he would or has ever hit a woman is false. Right now, let's talk with the host of the No Doubt About It podcast, Victory News contributor Mark Ronchetti. Mark, second gentleman Doug Emhoff recently attacked the Trump-Vance ticket. You got to listen to this.
Two guys who actually not only don't trust women, but are literally running on a platform of authoritarianism and misogyny. That literally should be their slogan.
So, Mark, is this the guy who should be making misogyny attacks against political opponents?
Mike, I think what's so discouraging when you listen to some of our political dialogue today is the absolute hypocrisy that you see coming from Doug Emhoff's the latest example here. And I think what people in this country want is a presidential candidate, and whether it's spouses or anyone connected to them, who put their interests first. But when you have people like Doug Emhoff, who are complete and total hypocrites in this whole process, it is discouraging because right now, think about all the problems we have, Mike. Think about what's going on in North Carolina. Think about what's happening with families trying to make their monthly budget here, and think about what's going on in the border. So many people have so many big concerns, but when you listen to those who are running for the highest office in the land or their spouses gaslight you into talking about their opponents in a way that doesn't even address what your family's going through, that's why people lose faith in what's going on with our leaders in this country, and Doug Emhoff is at the beginning of that list. And you can imagine if this was the other way, right? If the shoe was on the other foot, we know what the media reaction would be. But what is the media reaction now? It is dead silence unless you have certain outlets that are willing to cover it, and those outlets tend to be on the right. This should be a much bigger story because it is devastating when you talk about these kind of abuse allegations.
You know, Mark, let's talk about Jack Smith regurgitating his charges against Donald Trump just weeks before the November election. Isn't there a DOJ unwritten rule about this? Does this smell like desperation tactics and a pre-election distraction?
Well, Mike, when did this drop? It dropped the day after the vice presidential debate, which by any measure was handled very, very competently by J.D. Vance, and Tim Walz had quite a bit of trouble. You could just see the gap between these two individuals, whether it be knowledge of policy or whether it be how to get to a better place in this country. So to me, there's no question the timing on this thing right after what happened with the debate is not a surprise. And I would agree with you. I think what you see right now is anything against the wall to try to get it to stick. Now, what's interesting here is, Mike, I think what's happened is most people look at what's happened with Jack Smith and what's happened across the board here with a lot of the lawfare and what's being talked about with Donald Trump. A lot of that is baked in, Mike. I don't think it necessarily moves things either way. So I think this is going to end up coming down to when people look at their own personal lives and ask themselves the question, am I better off than I was 4 years ago? And Donald Trump is in the unique spot of being able to say, here's what I did, and then here is what the Harris administration did. And it's very difficult, as you saw with the vice presidential debate, for the Harris administration to make the case that Americans are better off. And if you are Donald Trump, that is where you are living for the last 30 days. You are talking about that comparison, and you are not worrying about any of the other stuff on the side. Trump can't deal with that. He can't affect it. So what he can do is continue to pound home the message, which J.D. Vance did during the debate. And also, Mike, one other quick thing on this. While Vance parried that message very, very well about how things look versus 4 years ago, one thing that was not done, one thing that wasn't drilled home is the extreme nature of some of Harris's positions. That needs to be the focus as well over the next couple of weeks here at least. And Mark, real quick, who you got coming up on your podcast? Well, Mike, actually, I have no idea. Quite frankly, I have not planned the official, no doubt about it, Sunday podcast yet, but maybe we'll have you. So let me just ask right now, are you fine coming on? We can talk about the issues of the day and talk about where we go in the last 30 days. You bet. You bet. Okay, bingo. We're producing right on the air. How about your last one? We talked about the debate, and that's what you can go back and look at. We talked about it with Jay McCleskey. What happened in this debate? What was J.D. Vance able to do? And I think as you're watching these sort of things, Mike, it really shows you when you have someone who carries the message well, it can be very, very effective and appeal to a huge portion of the country. All right, Mark Ronchetti, thanks for the time today. Great to see you. Thanks, Mike. Fior.
A Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at Temple University has been placed on an interim suspension for a disruption at a career fair last month. The Philly Voice reports a group of 12 to 15 anti-Israel protesters disrupted the career fair to oppose weapons manufacturers, during which a student along with 3 other outside agitators were arrested. University President Richard Engelhardt said freedom of speech is fundamental to Temple University's mission, but added, quote, as the university has previously noted, however, there is a line between freedom of expression and disruptive harassing activity. The operations of all Students for Justice in Palestine are temporarily suspended in compliance with the university's Student Conduct Code. Tim?
Few or many evangelical conferences across the country, like one held recently in Council Bluffs, Iowa, are filled with singing, cheering, and praying for our country's leader, specifically Donald Trump.
The election that we're dealing with right now, just to explain, this is not about Democrats and Republicans. It's really about biblical justice and social justice. That's what this election is about. That's what the fight is about, biblical justice and social justice. And so even the ideology of Marxism, it has to get rid of God first so that it can flourish and thrive.
One of the goals is mobilizing Christians to get out and vote their Judeo-Christian values. On Flashpoint Thursday night, Gene Bailey and his guests talked about the brutal attack by Hamas terrorists on the Israeli people as we approach the one-year anniversary on October 7th.
What people don't realize is that this didn't stop on October 7th. Since October 7th to now, the enemy against Israel has launched 11,000 missiles. Think about that. 11,000 missiles. Can you imagine if they were launching missiles like that into Texas or into New York? What would our response be? And what really upsets me is that during the last presidential debate, Kamala Harris said several times that she is going to enforce a two-state solution. When the enemies of Israel say from the river to the sea, they're not talking about a two-state solution. Gene, they're talking about a final solution. They'll never agree. No matter what we do, they'll never agree to a two-state solution because that means they have to acknowledge Israel as a sovereign state.
Be sure to watch this and all other episodes of Flashpoint when you visit govictory.com/flashpoint. Greg?
In a rare interview, former First Lady Melania Trump speaks out with support and strength for her husband.
I would think that the world, and especially United States, is more divided than ever before. We are dealing with much more danger.
Melania's unwavering public support for her husband in his third presidential campaign demonstrates her willingness to step into the spotlight when it matters most, despite the danger and intensity of the challenge. One of the things I appreciate, I watched that entire interview, and she says things that you and I would disagree with, but Donald Trump allows her to have her own opinion and her own ideas. That goes totally against what Imhoff said about him earlier. 877-281-6297, 877-281-6297. A licensed prayer minister is waiting right now to pray with you concerning anything that's coming up in your life or happening right now. They are ready and willing. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to hear the news today. We thank you that we are not dependent upon this report. We believe your report. Lord, give us strength and courage, opportunities of open doors to speak to other people, to shed the light, share the truth of what you want done in this nation. And bless all of those that are not in America but are watching us right now. In your name we pray. Amen. Our thanks to Ron Vitello, Mark Ronchetti, and especially you. Thank you for joining us and always being there on Victory News. We return today, 5 Eastern, 4 Central, with Convention of State Action President Mark Meckler. Make sure you join us as well. World Reports the Problem. Victory Channel brings the answer. Whatever's born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that's overcome the world, our faith. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. So stay in faith. God bless you. And we will look for you this evening at 5 Eastern. Bye for now.